Hi, this is Pastor Dave Peterson of Be Free Church with another in our Ask the Pastor series. I'm responding to a person who seems to have been pondering the birth of Jesus and the attention that Jesus' birth drew. We see from Scripture that there was recognition of Jesus as Messiah at his birth. And this person is wondering why that recognition seems to have disappeared between when Jesus was born and he started his public ministry at the age of 30. This is a great question as it brings to attention the gaps that we have, the scarcity that we have of the accounts of Jesus' life. Scripture tells us about his birth, about his dedication at 8 days, how at 2 years of age they fled to Egypt, how at 12 years of age he was in the temple interacting with the religious leaders, and then the last 3 years of his life. Luke actually summarizes 18 years of Jesus' life with one verse in Luke 2:52. And he says Jesus kept increasing in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and man. There's so much, it seems like there's so much more we could have known. Jesus' brother and mother were active in the early church. It actually seems that it would have been possible to have more accounts of the early years of Jesus' life. But we have to understand that the Gospels are not biographies in the modern sense. Modern biographies focus on how a person became notable in the events of the past and how it shaped their lives, whereas the Gospel focuses more on how the person was notable. Their focus is on the message of good news that Jesus' life and death brought. Paul says to Timothy that the role of Scripture is to make us wise unto salvation. And that's the role of the gospel, to shine on Jesus' life and the salvation that he brings. The fact that public interest and recognition of Jesus disappeared shortly after his birth is actually quite understandable. The shepherds were societal outcasts. The wise men had traveled from afar, and that meant that the early witnesses to Jesus' messiahship would have been scattered. Jesus was also displaced from his place of birth when he was forced to relocate to Egypt at the age of 2 because of Herod's intention to kill him. When Jesus' family relocated from Egypt, they ended up in another town. And it seems that this moving caused Jesus to quote unquote disappear from public sight. The fact that Jesus comes back into focus at 12 years of age and then again at 30 years of age actually has significance. In Jewish belief, it was around the age of 12 that a child would transition into adulthood. Even today, bar mitzvah ceremonies and bat mitzvah ceremonies mark that occasion. Jesus was at the age of 12, the age of transition, when he was in the temple interacting with the religious leaders. This is also the first record of Jesus' recognition of God as his Father. When his parents came to him and asked him, "Why are you here? Why weren't you with us?" Jesus said, "Didn't you know that I had to be in my Father's house?" Whereas 12 was considered the beginning of adulthood, the age of 30 signified the age when a person would reach the fullness of adulthood, of mature wisdom and understanding. In the Old Testament, Numbers 4:3, the age of 30 was the age when a priest started their service in the temple. In Jesus' day, a rabbi was not considered mature enough to begin their public ministry until the age of 30. Jesus started his public ministry at the age of 30. This question, in many ways, deals with the timing of Jesus' life and ministry and what we know about it. Paul writes in the book of Galatians 4 through 5, he says, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of woman, born under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons." Other translations say at the right time. It's amazing to think that throughout the ages, God has been writing a story of redemption, the story of Jesus. And this story came into time exactly as Jesus wanted it to. Many scholars look at the timing of when Jesus was born and the many elements of the Roman era with their highway system and what was called the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, and how this allowed the gospel to spread throughout the known world. Jesus' story comes into our story and history at just the right time. When I look at Jesus' life, I know that there's many parts that I would like to know. There's more that I'd like to understand. I'd love to know what he was like as a young adult and a child. But there's also many other parts of our life that we'd like to know, especially how our story and our future plays out. I find great comfort in knowing that the same God who wrote and brought to pass the redemptive story of Jesus is the same God who's the author of our lives and our story. And he's writing a story in which we can be used by him, and bring glory to him through all that we do throughout our lives. What an incredible privilege we have to be part of God's story.